Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're stepping into worlds long gone, places where survival was a daily gamble, where empires rose on the backs of caravans, and where honor was tested not just in battle, but in games and silence in the dark. We're diving deep into three forgotten corners of history, each more vivid, more brutal, and more fascinating than the last. First, life in Tudor Britain, a world of chamber pots, blackened teeth, and fashion so tight it could kill you. Imagine waking up in a room thick with smoke, sharing a lumpy sack of straw with your entire family, and stepping outside just in time to get hit by someone's breakfast from a second-story window. Then we cross continents to the Silk Road of medieval Turkey, where stone fortresses called Caravanserais rose like oases from the dust. These weren't just inns, they were lifelines, places where Persian merchants, Chinese traders, and wandering dervishes broke bread, shared stories, and passed music down the centuries, music that still echoes today. And finally, we sail north with the Vikings, not just as raiders, but as athletes, strategists, and champions, where swimming in glacial rivers was a test of courage, wrestling was a sacred sport, and board games were battles of the mind played with the same honor as war. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights a little more. Maybe light a candle. Let the modern world fade for just a while, because tonight we travel back. Welcome to Tudor Britain, a world where survival was a daily act of endurance, and comfort was a myth whispered by the delusional. You wake not to an alarm, but to the stench of chamber pots emptied into the street, the smoke of a dying fire filling your lungs, and the unmistakable sound of lice scuttling through your greasy hair. Dental hygiene? A foreign concept. Your teeth, blackened by sugar and scrubbed with soot or rags, are pulled out by barbers wielding pliers and shame. No anesthetic required. Breakfast is a bowl of coarse, gritty bread and a mug of ale. Yes, ale, because water could kill you, but at least it numbs the taste of despair. Then comes the fashion. Tight-laced bodices that crush your organs, starched ruffs that choke you, and pattens strapped to your shoes so you don't sink into streets made of dung, rotting food, and yesterday's regrets. This isn't just life, it's a hierarchy enforced by law, where your clothes scream your class. Ambition is punished as heresy, and poverty is a divine mandate. Work begins at dawn and ends when your body gives out. Whether you a farmer knee-deep in mud, or a servant sleeping in a hallway, your labor is endless, your rights non-existent. Medicine? That's bloodletting mercury and warm dung pressed to your chest. Because why treat illness with science when you can appease the humors with suffering? Religion shifts with the monarch. One week you're Catholic, the next Protestant, and if you pray wrong, you burn. The plague returns like a cursed holiday, turning cities into graveyards while doctors in bird masks wave herbs at the bad air. Entertainment? Public hangings, bear baiting, and pillories where you're pelted with rotten vegetables for stealing bread. Romance? A transaction? Love, a risky side effect. Marriage is less about passion and more about land, livestock, and surviving the childbirth roulette. Bathing is rare. Water opens your pores to disease, so you masked the stench with lavender and desperation, while your teeth turned black not from decay, but because the queen did it first, and now it's fashionable. Justice is spectacle, the stocks, the whip, the branding iron, or worse, hanging, drawing, and quartering, all for the price of a loaf of bread. And when you finally collapse into a lice-infested straw mattress, shared with half your family and possibly a stray cat, sleep offers no escape. Just 2 shifts of broken rest, punctuated by nightmares, fire hazards, and the ever-present fear that the dark itself might kill you. This was Tudor Britain, brutal, stinking, and breathtakingly real. Imagine a world without highways, without GPS, without borders as we know them, only endless deserts, snow-capped mountain passes, and vast, lawless plains where a single bandit raid could erase a lifetime of wealth. This was the Silk Road, not a single road, but a network of ancient arteries stitching together empires, faiths, and civilizations from China to Constantinople. And along this perilous path, rising like stone guardians from the dust, stood the Caravanserais of medieval Turkey, monumental inns built by the Seljuk sultans that transformed trade from a gamble into a system. Every 20 to 30 miles, a day's journey by camel, these fortress-like sanctuaries offered weary merchants, pilgrims, and wandering dervishes a place to rest, eat, and breathe again. From the outside, they looked more like castles than inns. Towering stone walls, arched gateways carved with geometric patterns and sacred calligraphy, and heavy wooden doors that could be barred against the night. Step inside, and the world changed. A vast courtyard welcomed camels and horses, while vaulted chambers lined the edges, offering shelter to their human companions. These weren't just rest stops. They were lifelines of trust, where a merchant from Venice could sleep soundly knowing his silks and glassware were guarded. Water flowed from fountains, fires warmed communal halls, and hot meals were served, sometimes for free, for 3 nights, by order of the Sultan. Hospitality was sacred, rooted in both Islamic tradition and Turkic custom, and it turned these caravanserais into engines of cultural exchange. Inside you might hear Persian traders bartering with Indian spice merchants, Armenian pilgrims praying beside Muslim dervishes, or Chinese envoys sharing stories under the stars. Languages collided, ideas sparked, and knowledge from medicine to astronomy passed hand to hand like currency. The architecture itself was a statement of power and piety. Every carved arch, every prayer niche, every watchtower whispered that the Sultan's authority stretched even into the wilderness. But beyond beauty and symbolism, these structures were economic powerhouses. They stabilized trade, encouraged longer journeys, and boosted local economies. Villages near caravanserais thrived, selling firewood, food, and craft to passing travelers. Money lenders, scribes, and healers set up shop within their walls, turning each stop into a miniature marketplace. And security? Absolute. Guards patrolled the courtyards, overseers mediated disputes between rival merchants, and storage rooms kept goods safe from theft. This wasn't just convenience, it was the foundation of a thriving Eurasian economy. But the caravanserais were more than commercial hubs. They were political tools, projecting the Seljuk image of a just and powerful empire. They sheltered pilgrims on the road to Mecca, reinforcing the state's role as protector of faith. They hosted diplomats, spies, and messengers, making them nodes of intelligence as much as trade. And when the empire weakened and the Ottomans rose and sea routes began to replace overland trails, the Caravanserais slowly faded, some repurposed as village centers, others left to crumble into romantic ruins. Yet their legacy endures. Today, many have been restored as museums, hotels, or cultural centers, their stone walls still echoing with the footsteps of history. And beyond the bricks and mortar, their greatest gift was connection. And beyond the bricks and mortar, because the Silk Road didn't just carry silk and spices, it carried music, the haunting oud of Persia, the thunder of Central Asian Nakara drums, the delicate pluck of the Chinese pipa, the rhythmic pulse of the Middle Eastern diaphragm drum, and the mournful cry of the Mongolian Morin Kur. All traveled these roads, blending in Caravanserai courtyards into a symphony of civilizations. Instruments evolved, styles fused, and traditions cross-pollinated, creating a musical legacy that still resonates today. The Caravanserais were not just shelters. They were the beating heart of a world in motion, where every traveler who passed through their gates carried not just goods, but stories, sounds, and the unbreakable thread of human connection. For the Vikings, life wasn't just lived on the battlefield or aboard long ships cutting through stormy seas. It was forged in the snow, tested in the hall, and proven in the games they played. Because for them, sport wasn't entertainment. It was survival dressed as competition. In the long, dark winters of Scandinavia, when the fjords froze and the wind howled like wolves, the Norse didn't retreat into silence. They turned the ice and snow into arenas. Skiing wasn't just travel. It was racing across frozen landscapes, a test of speed and balance under the gaze of Aura, the god of winter and the hunt. Bone skates strapped to boots turned lakes into racetracks where agility and endurance were celebrated like victories in war. And when the snow melted, the contests moved inland to wrestling or glima, a disciplined clash of strength and skill where touching the ground with anything but the foot meant defeat. It wasn't brawling, it was strategy in motion, a mirror of close combat, where honor demanded control, not just brute force. This was a culture that valued cunning as much as courage, and that's where hnefatafl, the king's table, came in. A board game of asymmetrical warfare where one side defended a king surrounded by enemies. It wasn't luck, but foresight, sacrifice, and tactical brilliance that won the day. Warriors played it by firelight, carved into wood, passed down through generations, even buried with the dead, because in Valhalla, a man's mind would be judged as fiercely as his blade. Swimming? That wasn't recreation, it was survival in glacial rivers, where young men competed to swim the farthest, stay under the longest, or wrestle each other beneath the surface. To endure the cold was to conquer nature itself, a feat celebrated in sagas as heroic as any raid. And then there were the weapons, not just for war, but for sport. Archery contests tested precision, axe and spear throwing measured strength and aim. Mock duels with blunted swords, sharpened reflexes, all under the watchful eyes of the community. But the real battlefield was the feast hall, where drinking horns brimmed with mead, and the games turned inward, to endurance, to wit, to flighting, the art of the verbal duel. Insults flew like arrows, sharp and poetic, where a well-placed boast could earn respect, and a weak retort could bring shame. Eating and drinking contests proved a man's stamina, not just his stomach, but his will. And beyond human contests, even animals were drawn into the struggle for honor. horse fights that pitted stallion against stallion, where victory elevated the owner's status and loss could spark feuds that lasted generations. Dogs, falcons, and hounds were judged for strength and skill, because for the Vikings, dominance wasn't just human, it was woven into the fabric of life. These games weren't diversions. They were rites of passage, training grounds, and social contracts. They taught boys to be warriors, leaders to be strategists, and communities to resolve rivalry without bloodshed most of the time. In every match, race, and challenge, the same values echoed: courage, resilience, cunning, and above all, honor. And that's the true legacy of Viking games. They weren't just played to win. They were played to be remembered. So we began in the smoke-choked rooms of Tudor Britain, where survival was a daily act of will, where fashion could suffocate you, and where a morning chamber pot was the closest thing to a wake-up call. We traveled east, across deserts and mountains, to the stone guardians of the Silk Road, the Caravanserais of medieval Turkey, where a single act of hospitality could save a life, and music flowed like water between worlds, stitching together empires with every note. And then we sailed north with the Vikings, not just as raiders, but as strategists, athletes, and poets, where honor wasn't earned only in battle, but in the grip of a wrestling hold, the pluck of a board game piece, or the silent endurance of a swim through ice-cold rivers. 3 worlds, 3 ways of living, 3 visions of what it means to be human. And yet in all of them, despite the filth, the danger, the cold, there was something unmistakable, a refusal to simply survive. They danced in plague towns. They sang in caravanserais under starless skies. They played games that trained their minds for war, and feasts that tested their courage with mead and mockery. Because even in the harshest times, humans have always reached for meaning, for connection, for joy, however strange, however fleeting. So the next time you sip clean water, sleep in a bed without lice, or listen to a song that crossed continents centuries ago, take a moment. Remember the people who lived and played and endured so that the world could keep turning. Thank you so much for watching. If this journey resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts below. Let me know, which of these 3 worlds would you have survived the longest in? Tudor Britain, the Silk Road, or the Viking halls? And as always, wherever you are, and whatever time it is there, thank you for being here. Until next time, sleep tight, and maybe check your mattress for fleas.